Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of our Summer Intern Series podcast here with the National Reentry Network for Returning Citizens. I'm your host again, Zach Rigoni, our policy director here, and I'm here with our summer interns.
Hi, I'm Cassidy.
Hi everyone, my name's David.
Hi, I'm Maryam.
So last time we got to talk a little bit about their experiences with the DC government. Now we're going to shift more internally, both to our clients and the community as we've been going out for our Community-Led Preventive Model program and as they've been interacting with our clients in our book club and on our Ready for Work program. And we're going to talk a little bit about their experiences as well as the organization's concept of public safety being a portion of public health, and it actually grows out of that public health concept. So to begin with, let's kind of hit on some of those interactions you've had with some of our different clients. What's a particular conversation or moment with our clients that really stood out to you?
I think just about any time we host our book club on Wednesdays, we always have very meaningful conversations. We get to hear a lot about some of the different things that our members are going through. We're currently reading The Mountain Is You by Brianna Wiest, which is kind of a self-help book, which is navigating like self-sabotage and like bad habits and like how to move past those. And so certain passages will like be very moving and like hit close to home for some of our members. And it's always very interesting to hear how they relate to different parts of the book and how it very much so like resonates with their lived experience. And I think that's just always one of my very most favorite things is being able to interact with those people on such a deep level and hearing everyone be able to get so vulnerable about their personal experiences.
And I'd say even for myself, the book, because like self-sabotage and like self-help is something like everyone can work on. And I think it's given me a lot to think about. And hearing from the returning citizens themselves, like being incarcerated during your 20s, and I'm 20 years old now, like there's a lot of like wisdom they've imparted on us as interns, and being able to learn from like what their life experience has been like truly like invaluable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, similar to Cassidy and David's points, when we read during book club, we often talk about individuals who were incarcerated during their 20s. And like a specific experience that stood out to me was I was talking to one of our clients and I was just curious because since we're all in our 20s right now, I can't really imagine being in a facility during my 20s. And for all of them, I just like can't really conceptualize that. So I was just talking to one of our clients who I particularly feel like I'm closer with. And she was locked up during her 20s. And I was asking her because, you know, there's so many books about how formative your 20s are and how fun your 20s are, especially as a girl. Like the TV show Sex and the City, like really like marketed your 20s. And to not have that, I think is like so shocking. And I was talking to her about it and she told me that you honestly kind of have to let yourself go when you're in prison during your 20s, and you kind of have to do whatever is best for you to be able to survive mentally in that state and physically. And even if that means being like a little crazy, then that's what you have to do. And not crazy in the sense of like behavioral issues, but her story was that the other inmates would allow her to pretend like she was going to college classes, and they would set up like little areas that were like a college class, and she would carry her little books and carry her notebook and her pencils and walk around the facility like she was at college, and her cell wasn't her cell, it was her dorm. And all like the older women just went along with it and knew that this was the space that they had to curate for her to be able to, you know, persevere through that time. And that was a moment that really, really struck me and stood out to me.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, It's definitely one of those things to where the connections that people can make inside sometimes can make or break kind of how you're able to get through that time. So I'm glad she had that opportunity. And talking about kind of the topics of the book with that self-sabotage and bad habits, that's such a, as David said, it's a universal thing, but it is so important to returning citizens because of the fact that you have to go through the prison system kind of in specific ways. It's a very structured and regimented process, and you have to almost conform to it in some fashion to be able to make it through. And then you're expected to come out and just keep all of those, or to not necessarily keep all the habits that you kind of formed there, where they call it institutionalization. But, do you think that there are some barriers or issues that people returning face trying to get used to what living in the general free public is compared to that experience?
Could you restate your question?
Yeah. Take for instance, while you're incarcerated, you're getting up at the same time every day. You're going to lunch at a specific time. You're going to specific places that you're told. In almost every aspect of your life, you are almost being dictated what you have to do. And then they get released, and now there's choice all over. Like, what, I guess my question to you all would be, what do you think the impact of that is, of having to come out and all of a sudden now going from where you had almost no choice to sudden choices, and why things like the book club and what's being read there might be important for someone as they do that transition?
I think that type of structure kind of sets returning citizens almost up for failure, just simply because that's not how the real world operates. They are given this type of schedule that you don't see in the outside world. And so that's why we see people like reoffending to go back, because they don't know how to function in the outside world. So they think, oh, it's better to go back and live in a place where I know how to function and I know how to like actually operate and sustain myself, instead of trying to figure it out in that outside world. And it kind of almost, like, that rigidity kind of similarly kind of reflects the rigidity we see through our education system, where like you have to be up at a certain time, you have to show up at a certain time, you eat lunch when you're told, and like over time you slowly get to have more autonomy, but then you're kind of thrown out into the real world where instead of being able to be set up where you're like, you know how to do your taxes and you know how to be an adult, you're just kind of like, okay, you know algebra, you know basic like grammatical principles, now you're an adult, go find your way to live. But that's just like not the best way to set people up to actually thrive in the outside world. You need to teach people how to actually function as an adult, because being an adult, like you were saying, is so, like, there's so much choice. Like, no one's going to show you how to be an adult. You just have to kind of be one yourself. Like, no one's going to hold your hand through this process, but through that type of system, that's all they're doing.
Me and David were literally just talking about this on our walk home the other day. It's kind of similar, kind of not, about how you go through elementary and middle and high school on like a very strict schedule, like wake up at 8, go to school at 3. Go home at 3, probably go to your extracurriculars around 4 to 6, come home, shower, go to bed. And it's the same thing every single day. And you get into this regimented lifestyle and it works and it functions and it's nice. And then you go to college and that whole schedule is just thrown out the window, and it's kind of, you pick your own classes, you only go to school maybe like 3 or 4 times a week, and you have 2-hour classes and that's it, and then you have the rest of your day to yourself, and you kind of get adjusted to that, and then 4 years of that, it's over, and then you're back into like the regimented lifestyle when you just got accustomed to not being like that. So I would assume that it feels similar to that in some sort of like kind of like reverse way. But I've never had a conversation with one of our clients like specifically discussing that question, and I think it would definitely be interesting to talk to them about how being in such a regimented lifestyle and then, coming out and facing the complete opposite affected them, and whether or not they think it would have benefited them or, did not benefit them. But I've personally never had a conversation about it, but I would imagine that what Cassidy said is true, and that it's similar to kind of, being in school and then not being in school and then going back to school, and then you just kind of get all flustered and it's like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And it's funny that you bring that up because I completely forgot about that. And the thing I was thinking of bringing up was like strict parenting and how like people's parents are super strict and then they go to college and make all these like wrong mistakes and like drink too much alcohol, do this, do that. And I think similar with like our prison system and like correctional facilities, when you put handcuffs on somebody and like don't allow them to live, like of course they're not gonna know what's right or wrong in it. Like it's almost like you're constraining them to do these certain things, and then all of a sudden it's like do whatever you want.
The barriers are completely
it's completely gone. And then that's like how reoffense like happens. Like they don't know any better sometimes.
So it's so neat getting to talk to interns and younger people going through this, because you sometimes have those realizations that there's connections that you might not otherwise notice. And I think this gives a great opportunity to kind of help maybe give you all a different way to think on things as well, because in a certain kind of way, what you're describing with the education system is in theory what the justice system, the legal system is supposed to be doing, where you go into the very strict situation of incarceration, then you're coming out onto supervision or probation, and it's that lighter touch, supposed to be less heavy regulation and regiment on you, some still there, but a transition point. But where it kind of fails in that analogy is all your professors, your assistants, your staff, your faculty at a college is there trying to help you grow and move forward to that next step of adulthood. They want to see you succeed. They're looking to make it as easy for you as possible. And whereas with probation, so often it's this churn of just an expectation that these people are going to end up failing. So let's get them back into the system. Let's put all these difficulties on them because we don't trust them, and so we have to really keep our thumb on them as close as possible. And to imagine going through college with a thought being that, if you mess up a little bit, you're back into high school or you're back into middle school, it's kind of the different connection there.
Yeah. I always find super interesting the parallels between, like, don't take this the wrong way, but prison and the military.
Okay.
Like the way that it's similar, I would say, also to like elementary, middle, and high school. If you went to somewhere that wears like a uniform, because you're confined in a space. This is not really for the education system. This is more about the parallels between like the prison system and the military. And you're confined in a space. You live with a bunch of other people on twin XL beds. You all have to wear the same thing. It's just, I find there's so many studies on it, and there's so many different like people who spend their whole lives like studying this kind of thing. But I always find it like that just made me think of it. Like it's so interesting, the parallels between them.
Yeah, and like having to wear a uniform like you were talking about very much so like strips your individualism.
Yeah.
Because you can kind of tell a lot by a person just based on how they present themselves. Like, for example, David is always looking very sharp in like a nice suit, and then like me and Maryam,
best believe David's in a suit.
best believe. And then like me and Maryam, on the other hand, like we're always dressed professionally, but we usually have like a bit of a pop of color,
a cardigan.
Like, yes, like a bit more comfort, like a little bit more casual. And I feel like you can like read a lot into like a person just based on like the way they style themselves. But when you're put into an institution where that individuality is stripped and you're just kind of made to all look the same, it's kind of like you're trying to produce like a cookie cutter like idealist vision of what a person is supposed to look like, and it just kind of makes it hard to understand like where you fit in this world because your identity has been stripped away from you.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to when you strip an individual of like their, not to be redundant, but individualism, you become like one of the masses, and it's not easier. When you're one of the masses, you follow rules, and that's what's in place in both of these systems, and that's the whole point of them, is this hierarchical, like, rule following basis. And that's why they're so similar, is because when it comes down to it, that's what you're supposed to do in both of these, like, systems, and that's why they do it.
So I love that. This is the wonderful thing about a podcast format, is I love how it can kind of dovetail into different areas. And touching on the military thing, I think it's one of those instances where there are a lot of parallels there. And I think what often gets lost, especially within the prison system as they push forward, is an understanding of the why the different things are going on. So that lack of individualism serves, in theory, a purpose in the military, in the sense that it's leveling everyone out. It's supposed to be your soldier next to you is no better, no worse than you. It's supposed to bring a sense of cohesion as you remove the self and increase the whole. It's the whole notion of the military is a service notion, and so you're stripping away the individual for the collective. The funny thing with the fact that they do this in prisons is you would think the last thing that they want to do is allow for the collective. They come down hard on any type of activity that seems to form groups in any way, to the point where something as simple as board games or tabletop games in prison can sometimes become a problem, because they say, oh, it's forming too much of a group. The reason for collective punishment in the military is to try to get them to police themselves and to hold each other accountable. In theory, they don't want that in prison, and yet collective punishment is routine. And so it ends up being, if it's not to make them a collective like it is in the military, what's the purpose? And it seems to just be dehumanization. I mean, can you think of any other reason beyond that? I think Maryam had one, in terms of this trying to force the compliance.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to, like, read up more on it and be able to give you a more well-rounded answer that I feel like I have the grounds to be able to. But I mean, yeah, from what I've previously read and understood, it's just goes back to like being one of the masses and understanding your role in that system. You are like the baseline of it. Like, you are not anywhere kind of near the top, unless obviously in the military you're an officer, obviously the rankings. But in facilities, it's the correctional officers, it's the warden, it's the CEOs, and it trickles down. And I think it's just to try and, like, let you know your place.
So going from this notion of removing the individual to let's focus on the individual a little bit, in terms of the importance of connection for those that are getting out, that are trying to get back into the world, especially those still going through supervision, where they do still feel that burden of the state still kind of over top of them. How do you think things like, say, the book club, or say some of the different events that we have help benefit as it relates to forming those human connections?
I think community is definitely one of the most important things when it comes to reacclimating to society, because at the end of the day, who's going to look out for you better than those in your community? Like, who's going to know what you need better than those in your community? And so, like, when you are in the carceral system and you are shipped away from your home state and you're across the country from your family and your support system, you're